Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports Podcast. It's Wednesday, March 23rd. I'm Blair Kerkhoff, and Tyreek Hill is no longer a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. The news of the Chiefs' trade of Hill to the Miami Dolphins on Wednesday was jarring, and so we had to talk about it. Beat writer Herbie Teope and columnist Vahe Gregorian joined me in discussing all aspects of the trade, why it happened, what it means for the Chiefs, and what the Chiefs will do with all their newly acquired draft picks. So let's get started talking Tyreek Hill and the Chiefs. Chiefs beat writer Herbie Teope is here and will be joined soon by columnist Vahe Gregorian. Of course, the big news today, Tyreek Hill, no longer a Kansas City Chief. He's a member of the Miami Dolphins in a trade that brings the Chiefs 5 draft picks, including 3 this year. But man, the Chiefs are losing a dynamic player, a clutch player, the fastest player in the NFL as far as I'm concerned. So my question to you, Herbie, to get this thing kicked off is, why did this happen?
A lot of stuff behind the scenes leading up to this, okay? We know that the Chiefs attempted to do a contract extension with Tyreek Hill. And, these grumblings started at the Combine. It started a week before free agency started. For all intents and purposes, it looked like something would get done. The Chiefs needed cap space. So Tyreek Hill was someone that obviously, if we can get an extension done on him, let's spread out his cap hit this year, because he was scheduled to count almost 20 million plus against the cap. So you get an extension done, no problem. Okay, now you have some additional cap space. But something happened the first week of free agency that just absolutely reset the wide receiver market. I'm specifically talking about the Packers sending 2-time All-Pro wide receiver Davante Adams to the Raiders. Now, the Packers got a first-round pick and a second-round pick in exchange, but then what they ended up doing was they signed Adams to a 5-year deal worth up to $141.2 million. That deal there made Adams the highest-paid wide receiver in the NFL. Now, when you look at Tyreek Hill's representation, he's repped by Drew Rosenhaus, one of the high-profile, big-time NFL agents. Rosenhaus probably looked at that deal and said, wait a minute, what are we doing here? If Adams can get a 5-year, $141 million deal, what can I get for Tyreek Hill? Now, a lot of the background information, from what I'm told, the Chiefs offered Tyreek Hill, and I quote this, a lot of money, end quote. But Hill wanted more. And a lot of that had to do with what happened with Davante Adams in Las Vegas. And that prompted, when all of a sudden the talk stalled, then Brett Veach and his crew gave Drew Rosenhaus permission to seek a trade leading up to where we are now. And it happened fast, because it publicly became known around 9, 10 o'clock this morning that Wednesday morning, that he was granted permission. And then less than an hour later, the 2 top teams that were in pursuit of him, the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins, he had a deal with the Dolphins. So that's where we are now.
I had heard, maybe it's just through some Twitter chatter, that the Jets were not going to part with a first-round draft pick. They were going to come up with a package that was somewhat comparable to the Dolphins, but it didn't include a first-round draft pick. That must have been essential for the Chiefs to get a first-round pick.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's what the Green Bay Packers got in exchange for Davante Adams. When I mentioned Adams resetting the market, he reset it not just with the pay scale, but also the compensation. Adams is a 2-time All-Pro. Tyreek Hill is a 3-time All-Pro, 6 consecutive Pro Bowl selections. So if you're going to trade a player in the caliber of Tyreek Hill, as you mentioned at the top of the show, one of the more dynamic, explosive players in the NFL, the fastest wide receiver in the NFL, you got to get a first-round pick back in exchange, and that's what the Chiefs did. Overall, what a haul. What a haul. You're talking, 5 draft picks, 3 draft picks this year, including that first-round pick and a second, and then 2 draft picks in 2023. And then not only that, the move also freed up a lot of cap space. So, the Chiefs, it was a win-win. You could look at it from a business point of view, but from a fan point of view, they're probably sick in the stomach right now that the Chiefs gave up Tyreek Hill.
When Vahe joins us, I want to talk about this in terms of the the short-term pain versus the long-term pleasure. Because I do think there's, we can look at it in those terms, that there is going to be a short-term hit for the Chiefs to lose somebody like this, but they're getting younger. They're clearing, as you said, clearing cap space. They're just going to be more financially prepared to continue to be good later, maybe than they would have otherwise. But let's go back to Tyreek Hill / Davante Adams. Davante Adams got to the market first. I thought when the Packers, when Aaron Rodgers determined he was coming back to the Packers, that meant Davante Adams would be back as well. I guess that was never the case for Davante. Not when the Raiders are going to throw around a package like they did for him. And I remember when that happened, Tyreek Hill on his Twitter account just showed that eyeball emoji, right? When we saw Davante Adams' numbers, we saw the Tyreek Hill eyeball emoji. No comment, just the eyeballs. And I guess that was telling. Am I right about this? I've got Davante Adams at kind of pushing $70 million in guarantee money, but Tyreek Hill's forward for 120 guarantee $72.7 million. So
and what a monster deal, because you're absolutely correct, because the Dolphins turned right around and gave Tyreek Hill the extension, making him, now he supplants Adams as the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. Money talks. That's the crazy thing about the business. Money definitely talks. All
right, let's so we kind of figured out why it happened. Let's spend a moment at least discussing Tyreek Hill's new environment. He's going from Patrick Mahomes to Tua in Miami, a real, I think, drop in quarterback play. I don't know how this is going to affect Tyreek Hill or how the Dolphins are going to use Tyreek Hill, if at all, any differently than the Chiefs. He's no longer a return guy except in emergency situations or when they feel they needed a big play, they put Tyreek Hill back there. We'll see if he can make a difference, a big-time difference for the Dolphins. I do think Tyreek Hill brings a skill set that can be a game-changing skill set to an NFL team that's decent. And the Dolphins were decent last year. What were they? They fired Flores and they ended up with a winning record. So we'll see. Doesn't he live in Miami or have a home in Miami, Tyreek?
And I know he trains down there, doesn't he?
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. I know he spends time down there. I can see him as a kind of a warm weather player, being, just enjoying that environment there in Miami. Those home games in December, much more comfortable there than they are in Kansas City.
You bring up the biggest point, okay? When you're talking about the two quarterbacks, the conventional wisdom is people want to come and play for Patrick Mahomes. For comparison purposes, Tyreek Hill just went from a Lamborghini to a Yugo. That's not necessarily knocking the Dolphins quarterback, but you're talking about two different skill sets here, and Mahomes is Mahomes. There's a reason why Tyreek Hill's numbers just exploded from 2018 over the last 4 seasons when Mahomes became the full-time starter. And he's got 2 All-Pro selections in there, as well as 3 straight Pro Bowl selections, all of them coming under Patrick Mahomes. And this offense is just going to look completely different next year. I know the Chiefs signed Juju Smith-Schuster. They signed Corey Coleman. You have Mecole Hardman coming back. None of those 3 are going to remind you of Tyreek Hill and what he brings to the defense. Defenses had to scheme against Tyreek Hill. You had to take away, you had to find a way to defend against Tyreek Hill. When you look at this Chiefs offense right now, the only one they really should be concerning themselves with as far as the dependable threat is going to be Travis Kelce. When I just mentioned Mecole Hardman, this is his year. If he doesn't show up this year, the Chiefs got to cut bait, and you got to find another solution at the wide receiver position, because we're right back where we started. Last few off seasons, we were always talking about who's the number 2 wide receiver. Now the answer is, or the question is, who's the number 1?
Gosh, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I've got something of a depth chart here. Let's go over it as we welcome in Vahe Gregorian. He is about to join us and jump in on the conversation here. All right, Vahe, we've gone over the sort of the why it happened, and now we're talking about the impact of the Tyreek Hill trade. Let's look at who's not back for the Chiefs at that position. Tyreek Hill, Demarcus Robinson, and Byron Pringle. Over the Hill for 6 years, Pringle for 3, I believe, and Demarcus for 6 years. Those guys have been stalwarts for the Chiefs and have been productive players. Of course, nothing on Hill's level, but Pringle and Robinson fill out the wide receiver depth chart. All right, coming back, McCole Hardman, you mentioned, Josh Gordon, who I'm interested to see how he develops in the Andy Reid offense. We still have Darius Fountain under a Chiefs contract. Gary Dieter still with the Chiefs, and technically, correct me if I'm wrong, Cornell Powell is still a Chiefs player, right? Even though he did make a draft pick, but didn't play for the Chiefs last year. You mentioned Juju Smith-Schuster, Corey Coleman, and how about Marcus Valdez-Scantling? What's his story?
He's no Tyreek Hill, okay? And I know he had his good seasons up in Green Bay. He's viewed as a speedster, but over the past four seasons, when you compare his production to Tyreek Hill, it's not even close. This is a guy that has never topped 500 yards receiving in each of those 4 seasons. So if you're looking for the speed element, then yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and kick the tires there, see what he brings. But, when you mention those receivers who are coming back, Josh Gordon, Darius Fountain, Cornell Powell, they're all on reserve future deals. So they're not even guaranteed to make the roster. Josh Gordon finished the year last season with 12 appearances, but he finished the season on the practice squad. Darius Fountain was an emergency pull-up every Saturday from the practice squad. So you got to find the guys who are actually going to make this roster. I think when they signed Juju Smith-Schuster, he was going to be the answer to who's the complementary piece to Tyreek Hill. Now you got to, it goes back to what I said a few minutes ago. Now, instead of answering the question, who's the number 2, who's the number 1?
Well, the number 1 will either be Smith-Schuster or McCole Hardman. Who's the number 3? Who's their third starter when they start 3 wide receivers? That's what I don't know. I mean, do the Chiefs approach the draft differently now with that position in mind? We're all thinking defense for the Chiefs with their first pick, or at least now one of their first 2 picks in the first round, edge rusher or cornerback, but is wide receiver something that they may take a hard look at?
I think you have to. Brett Veach mentioned at the Combine a couple of weeks ago that this draft class is deep, and that's one of the things that we've noticed over the last 2 or 3 seasons with all these prolific offenses in college, that the wide receiver pool has been deep. So they should have some options, but with the wealth of draft picks they have right now, it would not surprise me one bit if one of those 12 draft picks is used early on a wide receiver.
Okay. Vahe, what was your kind of gut reaction to the news this morning?
Gut reaction is no matter what they get back, it's really hard to embrace this right now without even having a face to put on what's coming back. And, and I think it's crucial to make that point, though. Right now is that point. That's what it feels like now. And we need to remember a couple things. On one hand, the magic of Patrick Mahomes has really hinged a little bit on Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. I mean, that's just true. It's a remarkable trio. On the other hand, we have also seen in the Veach era, the Chiefs clear out a couple people while we're waiting to see what's going to happen. And what I can't envision is what's going to happen that makes this receiver group stronger in the near future. I think I said this in what I wrote, and I believe it to be true. It's impossible to say the Chiefs are going to be a better team just based on this deal this season. I mean, okay, maybe they're going to get some help in ways that bolster certain things. But in my way of thinking, it all starts with Patrick, Travis, and Tyreek. And I get that maybe the financial loggerheads meant you just had to do it. I get that it's, at 28, you can start seeing a case that Tyreek might be starting to go downhill, except for those pesky 111 catches he had last season. And Sam McDowell had an interesting tweet on this, and I think it's a good way to look at it. In a sense, you feel like the Chiefs are trying to extend the window by kind of replenishing, shedding payroll, shedding age, so to speak, and extend the window of the Patrick Mahomes era. But the problem is, I feel like the near future isn't as bright when you have what appears to be Justin Reed for Tyrann Mathieu, when you have obviously this trade happening. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, if you see it differently, but that's how I feel.
I tend to agree with you, Vahe, and you bring up a fantastic point about Mahomes, how this offense revolves around him. You mentioned Travis Kelce and you mentioned Tyreek Hill. Let's go back to the Super Bowl win. Do they have time to run wasp if not for Tyreek Hill? And then, that's just the way to put it there. I'm just really curious to see how they approach this in the draft and what they're going to look like. Blair, I know you mentioned that Juju Smith-Schuster and McCole Hardman are probably your number ones, but when I look at Juju Smith-Schuster's career in Pittsburgh, there were a couple of years, 3 years actually, where he played second fiddle to Antonio Brown. And then so, just these past 2 seasons, he had the opportunity to play the number one role, and his production has gone down. So it's really going to be interesting to see how he steps up.
What I find it a little hard to understand, and it makes me realize that we probably don't, or that at least I don't have a real feel for the cosmic strategy here, is that if they knew they were going to trade Tyreek, I mean, I'm kind of a Byron Pringle guy, and I realize he's no Tyreek, but I sort of thought he's a guy I'd still want in the mix, and maybe a little bit more if that's a loss you're going to sustain. So it keeps me thinking about, all right, what are the sleights of hand here that we just don't see coming?
I'll say this with Byron Pringle, because a lot of that stuff happened around the same time as the Devontae Adams trade. I to use Vahe's line here, I put a line in the water to find out if they tried to keep Byron Pringle. And I was told yes, but the bottom line was they couldn't afford him. So I was like, wow, okay, you couldn't afford a 1-year deal, $6 million contract that he signed in Chicago, which makes sense because last week at the start of free agency, the Chiefs didn't have a lot of capital to spend.
All right, hey, we're going to take a quick break, and I want to get into a couple other Tyreek Hill related topics when we get back. Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Okay, we're back with Herbie Teope and Vahe Gregorian. I'm Blair Kerkhoff. We're talking about the Tyreek Hill trade to the Miami Dolphins. Tell me what you think about this thought that one of, if not the best statistical, well, we would know if it's the best. I think it is the best statistical game of Tyreek Hill's career was the regular season game at Tampa Bay 2 years ago when he had over 200 receiving yards in the first quarter, ended up with over like 269, I think, something like that, some crazy number, 3 touchdowns. Poor Carlton Davis, the Bucs quarterback, got roasted in that game. But then those teams turn around and meet in the Super Bowl, and that's where the Chiefs begin to see the shell coverage. And Tyreek Hill is double covered, and so is Travis Kelce, and the Bucs took the Chiefs passing game completely out of the game. And then from then on, that's what the Chiefs saw almost exclusively, right? All this past season, the regular season and through the playoffs. I guess it's a roundabout way of saying Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are two of the rare players in the NFL that demand a defense account for them and game plan against them. And and have to use multiple, sources to cover Tyreek Hill. That's what the Chiefs are losing with this guy. He is not replaceable. You can make the case that Devontae Adams is overall a better wide receiver. There is nobody more dangerous than Tyreek Hill. And I guess I want to drive home the theme that Vahe has made and Herbie, you and I talked about. There's just going to be a little short-term loss here for the Chiefs. And the long-term picture involves the 12 draft picks and what they can do with these, how they're going to package them to either move up or what they're going to do. They have the number 29 and 30 overall picks in the first round, right? They've got number 52, number 50, number 62, 94. They have essentially 120 they have 7 picks among the first 120. You can begin to shape a roster with that kind of draft capital, I believe. And that's why this draft is going to be the most important one for the Chiefs since the Patrick Mahomes draft. Agree or not?
Go ahead, Vahe.
No, I think unmistakably, right? Because if you look at it, all of this stuff set in motion now kind of makes me feel like we're at another pivot point for the organization, right? We've been sort of feeling like we're operating in a window. Well, that's not exactly the same feeling right now, is it? I mean, this is think of it this way. It appears 2 of their top 4 players, 2 of the top 4 or 5 players are no longer with this team. What you think of as the real nucleus. And
including
now you're talking about,
and
including Tyrann Mathieu appears, right? Unless you guys know something I don't. So, I mean, and that kind of, draft capital, which I think you could really call that. That's not just a moment in time. That's a movement. And how each of these things aligns with the other, we guess we need to be in the war room to hear people explaining how this is working, and we're not going to be in the war room, but I think we can surmise that the very things we've been talking about are at the core of it. But it is interesting to me that the real question I find myself asking is, does this mean we should think they're extending this feeling of 7-8 years that with the whole Mahomes era, let's just say, or that they're calculating that the bigger pop is down the road than it might be this season? I mean, I'm just winging this point, but I find it hard to think that they're going to be better offensively without Tyreek Hill this season.
Vahe is absolutely correct. And to Blair's point about how teams had to scheme against Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, Darius Butler, former NFL cornerback, took to Twitter roughly about an hour ago and said defenses no longer have to fear the Chiefs because Hill is the kind of guy that strikes fear in the hearts of defenses. Look how the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick, made it a point to take away Tyreek Hill. And that's just an ultimate sign of respect. I think when you look at the draft, Blair, you mentioned 7 picks within the first 120, 5 of them coming within the first 100. The Chiefs cannot miss on this draft. And Vahe is dead correct on that. Because if you're going to use those early draft picks, those first and second round draft picks, these are guys you got to draft to start immediately. And that sense of urgency has to be heightened when you look at what the AFC West has done this offseason. When you take away Tyreek Hill now, I don't know how the Chiefs stack up against the Raiders, against the Broncos and the Chargers, who all seem to get better defensively and offensively to face the Chiefs. Now they're facing the Chiefs without a guy like Tyreek Hill.
Absolutely. You can make the case that the Chiefs are the one of the 4 teams in the division that did not improve so far anyway, have not improved. We've got the draft to go and other roster moves that will be made, but you're right. The Chargers, the Raiders, and the Broncos all made additions that screamed, "We're coming after you, Kansas City." And the Chiefs, lose their top wide receiver, likely their best their defensive leader, and we look at this as a longer term thing. Listen, I remember when the Patriots won 3 of those 4 Super Bowls at the beginning of Tom Brady's career. And then they didn't win another Super Bowl for 9 years. they stayed competitive. They kept winning divisions and going to the playoffs, but they didn't win Super Bowls. And then toward the end of Brady's stint in New England, they ended up winning more Super Bowls. I don't know if the Chiefs' Super Bowl window is closed for now. To me, if you're a playoff team, you've always got a chance to be a Super Bowl team. But the team that they were in Patrick Mahomes' first 4 years as a starter is different now. It just is. Without Tyreek Hill, it makes the Chiefs different. It removes an element that made them different. We can talk about McCole Hardman's speed all we want. And he was drafted, as we recall, he was drafted maybe to be Tyreek Hill's replacement almost immediately, given Tyreek Hill having the legal problems that he was having at the time. But there is no Tyreek. There's no speed like that in the NFL. So, one thing I wanted to do before we wrapped it up is the guy. I did a little post on Tyreek Hill's 5 most impactful moments as a member of the Chiefs, and of course the reception of the Super Bowl. Jet Chip Wasp is at the top of the list, but. He made big-time playoff catches against the Cleveland Browns when Chad Henne threw the short pass to clinch that game, and the Buffalo Bills this year in the divisional round when he turned that short pass into the long touchdown. I mean, that was just an amazing play. And but it also occurs to me that he brought almost a fun. He brought a sense of fun to the Chiefs on the field with his end zone celebrations and just the way he interacted with players. And I wanted to get you guys some of your favorite moments from him that weren't necessarily touchdowns or big plays, but just, Tyreek Hill, the personality. Vahe, what do you think about with Tyreek Hill?
Well, you're right. I think I described him. I don't remember how I phrased it, but I think he was, really one of the most mesmerizing guys I've ever watched play, and in part because you just had no idea what he was capable of at any given moment during the play, but then you also had no idea what he was capable of after the play. Remember just early on how he'd always run like another 20 yards after the play was over, just, kept going. Yep. But I have to say, and I'm kind of a prude on some of the, traditional things. Like I like the guy who hands the ball to the ref, right? But I could not wait to see Tyreek Hill's celebrations every time, whether it was the James Brown kind of, faking the heart attack and falling over or whatever he was doing that one time, or the taking the camera.
I love the
up
camera.
In the stands.
Yeah, go sit in the cameraman's seat, right?
And taking the cameraman's seats, shoving him out of the way or whatever he did. And of course the cheerleader thing, which was absurd but hilarious. So all that stuff. I mean, I can't think of a guy that at least not very often that you just wanted to watch before, during, and after the play more than Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Vahe on all of everything you said, from the peace signs to cheerleading to dancing on the sidelines when the game is in doubt, or when the game is over. The character of Tyreek Hill will forever be remembered. But like as a sports journalist, for me, what I enjoyed about covering the guy is anytime you touch the ball, you found yourself holding your breath. It's like, what is this guy going to do? And just recent memory, go back to the 13-second game against the Bills, how he almost single-handedly turned that game around, in the fourth quarter in the waning moments, the punt return, the touchdown when it looked like 7 Buffalo Bills missed him in the open field. This is the kind of electricity that he brought to Kansas City, to the Chiefs offense and also the Chiefs history.
He was something of a phenomenon before Patrick Mahomes became the starting quarterback. He had 2 seasons with Alex Smith as a starter and had some great moments with the Chiefs in his first 2 years. That game in Denver when he scored a touchdown with a punt return, a kickoff return, and I think as a receiver, and became the first rookie to do that since Gale Sayers, I believe. And on one of those returns, remember he and DeAnthony Thomas went into the end zone together with their hands, holding hands, basically like a high five. It was hilarious.
Blair, You mentioned that, but how about him running down Darrell Williams a couple of years ago?
That's unbelievable. That was unbelievable. Darrell Williams, it was a 91-yard touchdown run against the Vikings, and Darrell Williams it was Damian Williams. Damian Williams,
I'm sorry.
Gave him about a 10-yard lead, and Tyreek Hill just blew past a defender and beat Williams to the end zone. It was hilarious. One of the more athletic plays was his touchdown at the end of the first half at Dallas, a loss at Dallas. It was a Hail Mary situation, but the Chiefs went just over the middle short. And Tyreek Hill found his way through the line of defense that was set up at about the 10-yard line and ended up scoring. And I think in that game as well, the Chiefs had the potato sack race end zone celebration.
They did. Same game. Yeah. Wonder who thought of that.
Just right. We used to go to practices and see them rehearsing their touchdown celebrations on the Friday. So, yeah, look, he'll go down as one of the great Chiefs of all time, right? When you're picking an all-time Chiefs team, who's the second? Who would be the guy? I don't know.
Blair, it just occurs to me, and this may be maybe a little bit of overhype, but I keep looking at his numbers and also what he's done in the playoffs, and really I think he's starting to stack a case for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. If he has another 3-4 years of this ilk, and that's a question mark, right? And maybe it's a question the Chiefs feel like they've answered, but he has another 3-4 years. I think he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer, and at least in my way of looking at it, the guy changes every game he's in, and the numbers add up to that, but also the eye test really adds up to that.
I know the Dolphins are counting on that, and I totally agree. I think he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory for sure. He's already got a Super Bowl ring. He's been a difference maker in so many games. He's a unique talent, and he is no longer a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. So, all right, guys, busy day for everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time and talking about this. And Herbie Teope, Vahe Gregorian, thanks a lot, guys, and we'll talk Chiefs again soon. That'll do it for today. Thanks to producer Monty Davis, along with Jeff Rosen and Chris Fickett, who performed double podcast duty today. Tip of the cap to Vahe Gregorian and to Herbie Teope. Hey, today's morning sports edition was 56 pages. Just saying, you know how I enjoy that product, and I'm sure you would too. Go to the subscription tab on kansascity.com for more information. We'll be back soon with another episode of SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening.